My daughter-in-law, Danielle Granderson, left my 5-year-old granddaughter, Lily, at my place for just one night. The next morning, Lily whispered to me, "Grandma," Mom said, "I can't tell you what I saw at home." I asked her, "Sweetheart, what did you see?" Her answer made me calf police right away. "I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of vindication from. I want to know how far it's reached." I still clearly remember that night. The yellowish light from the street lamps falling over the porch, casting trembling shadows of the bare trees that seemed to reflect my own heart at that moment. I lived in a small worn house on the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia, where every corner was soaked in memories of days gone by. That evening, Danielle brought Lily over. She said she had to work the night shift, an excuse I'd heard countless times. But this time, something was different. It was like a chill wind slipping through a crack in the door that made me shudder. Danielle stood frozen on the threshold, hesitating to step inside as she usually would. Her hands were clutched tightly around the straps of her purse. Her knuckles white, her eyes darted nervously down the alley as if searching for an invisible shape in the darkness. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked, her voice trembling, repeating the same question for the third time, even though I had already nodded and smiled to reassure her. I looked into her eyes, trying to find a trace of the sweet daughter-in-law she once was, but only found a tension I couldn't explain. Beside Danielle, Lily, my tiny granddaughter, was pressed against her mother, tightly hugging her faded, worn teddy bear named Barnaby. Lily's school clothes were wrinkled. She must have worn them all day. Her large round eyes looked up at me with a mix of shyness and pleading, as if begging for a safe harbor. My heart squeezed. It had been so long since I could simply hold my granddaughter and hear her uninhibited laughter. As Danielle turned to leave, she leaned toward Lily and whispered low enough that I barely caught it, "Sleep well, my love. I'll come get you tomorrow." Then she looked up, and her eyes met mine in a fleeting flash. In that instant, I felt something, a warning or a plea. I wasn't sure, but the look left me chest heavy. Danielle turned quickly, and her slender silhouette soon disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone with Lily on the porch. I took Lily's hand and led her inside. My small kitchen was filled with the aroma of the chicken noodle soup I had prepared that afternoon to welcome her. I placed the bowl in front of Lily and smiled. "Have some, sweetie. I made it just for you." But she barely moved the spoon, her eyes lost in the bowl. "I'm not hungry, Grandma," she murmured softly, as if afraid to disturb the silence. I tried to hold my smile, but inside I hurt. My Lily, the child who used to chatter excitedly about school, now seemed like a silent shadow. All night, Lily curled up on the sofa, clutching Barnaby, staring blankly at the screen where brightly colored cartoons played. I knew she wasn't truly watching them. Her eyes were empty, lost in a world I couldn't enter. I sat beside her, longing to ask, to reach out. But every time I tried to speak, I saw that distance in her eyes and kept quiet. Perhaps I thought all she needed was time to feel safe. That night, I made up the old daybed for her next to me in the small room where I still kept the rocking chair that belonged to my son, Alex. Lily lay down quietly, facing the wall, hugging Barnaby. In the silence, I could clearly hear her heavy sigh like those of an adult tired of life. Those sighs reminded me of my own sleepless nights after Alex's passing when I only heard the painful beat of my heart. I wanted to hug Lily, to tell her I would always be there. But I was afraid to startle her, so I lay still, listening and praying for her sleep to be peaceful. My own sleep was restless. Close to midnight, I woke up startled by Lily's sobs. The child was whimpering in her sleep, her voice shaky and broken. "Grandma, I'm so scared. Don't leave me." I quickly sat up and placed my hand on her shoulder, but Lily remained asleep, her brow furrowed and lips tight. as if trying to contain the fear. I gently stroked her hair and whispered, "I'm here, my love. I'm not going anywhere." But inside me, a vague worry began to grow, like a cold draft seeping through my fingers. The next morning, the light of dawn filtered through the window blinds, drawing warm golden rays across the floor. I rose early, silently slipped into the kitchen, and tried to create a comforting atmosphere to dispel the heaviness off the previous night. Eggs sizzled in the skillet. The smell of toast and hot cocoa spread through the little kitchen. I wanted Lily to wake up and feel that warmth just as Alex used to every morning when he was little. But deep down, I knew nothing was as it was before. Lily came out of the room with tangled hair and red swollen eyes, as if she had cried hard. She was still clutching Barnaby tightly, as if he was the only thing holding her up. I tried to smile, my voice soft. "Sweetheart, did you sleep well last night?" Lily lowered her head, her lips pressed together, nothing swearing immediately. I kept flipping the eggs in the pan, trying to keep my voice light. "I made you scrambled eggs and hot cocoa. Will you sit and have breakfast with me?" The child hesitated, then sat at the table, but without letting go of the teddy bear. I put the plate in front of her silently, wishing she would eat a little, if only to calm down. But then Lily murmured in a voice so low it was almost a breath, just enough for my entire world to stop. "Grandma, Mom told me not to tell you what I saw at the house." My hand froze in the air, the spatula about to fall. I turned slowly, put the spatula down on the counter, and tried to keep my voice from trembling. "Sweetheart, don't be afraid. What was it that you saw?" I knelt in front of Lily, looking into her clear eyes now filling with tears. She pressed her lips together, fighting between fear and the need to speak. And then, with a trembling voice, every word tore at my heart. "There's a little girl locked in the basement at home. Grandma, she won't stop crying. She says her hands hurt a lot. Clang. The metal spoon dropped from my hand onto the tile floor. The dry sound echoed in the silence. The glass of milk on the table wobbled and spilled a thin white stream. I was paralyzed, unable to believe what I had just heard. Lily's terrified eyes looked at me as if asking for help, as if she had just released a secret too big to carry any longer. I wanted to say something, to ask for more, but my throat tightened as if someone were squeezing it hard. Lily burst into tears and threw herself into my arms, burying her face in my shoulder. Her small body shook uncontrollably like a tiny bird caught in a storm. I hugged her tight, feeling every one of her shaky breaths. But in my mind, 1,000 questions screamed. A little girl locked up at Daniel's shoes. How could that be possible? I wanted to believe Lily had just imagined it, that it was a child's nightmare. But her eyes, the sheer terror on her face, told me this was not a childish story. I gently stroked her tangled hair, trying to calm her. But my mind had already traveled back to the days when the memory of my little family was still intact, as bright as the Atlanta sunshine. Years ago, this house wasn't so silent. It was full of laughter, voices, and those familiar aromas that came from the kitchen. I perfectly remember those weekend afternoons. That's when my son Alex, a tall, strong civil engineer, would walk in with a smile as bright as the sun, always transmitting a warm energy as if heckled to dispel any shadow. "Mom, I had the whole team laughing their heads off at the construction site today." He would begin his stories while kicking off his dusty work boots and lifting Lily onto his shoulders. Lily, so small, then barely learning to walk, would laugh heartily when her father tossed her in the air, moving her little hands as if she wanted to touch the sky. Danielle, my daughter-in-law, was a sweet young woman back then, with a smile that shone like a sunflower. She and I used to spend hours in the kitchen together preparing our favorite family recipes. She would ask, "Mom, do you think Alex will like this dish?" Her eyes sparkling with joy. I would smile and tease. If Alex doesn't enjoy what we prepare, I'll scold him myself. Those simple, warm moments were like precious jewels in my memory, treasures I thought would last forever. Family dinners were the time I cherished most. Alex would sit at the head of the table telling funny anecdotes from the job. From Sami unjumping a bucket of concrete to the times the whole crew sang along during break. Little Lily, seated on his lap, listened intently with her enormous eyes, sometimes interrupting with innocent questions. "Daddy, is that truck as big as our house?" I would just sit there watching my little family, my heart filled with peace. There were moments when I would tell myself I was a fortunate woman with a complete family, even though life was never simple. But everything was shattered on a rainy night marked by fate. I still remember that early morning when the phone rang insistently, tearing through my sleep. The voice on the other end trembled as it gave me the news. Alex had been in an accident. His car lost control on a slick, dark road and plunged into a ravine. I froze, clutching the receiver, feeling the whole world crumble beneath my feet. No, it can't be, I murmured Dot, but the cruel truth would never change. Alex, my sunshine, the light of my life, was gone forever, leaving a void impossible to fill. Alex's funeral took place on a gray day with a drizzle falling like tears from the sky. I held Lily, who was only 2 years old, tight against my chest. The confused Hild still didn't understand that her father was gone forever. "Where's Daddy, Grandma?" Lily asked in a voice so clear it made me want to break down sobbing. I hugged her tighter and whispered, "Daddy is in a far-off place." "But he's always watching you, my love." Danielle was there a few steps away from me, but she seemed to belong to another world. Her eyes were vacant, her face pale as a stone statue. I wanted to approach her, to take my daughter-in-law's hand, but something in her look stopped me. A pain too vast, too deep that I didn't know how to reach. After Alex's death, this house was shrouded in a somber fog. Daniel's smile disappeared. She became quiet, withdrawn. She spent hours locked in her room. Some days I could hear her sobbing behind the closed door. But whenever I knocked to go in, she would reply coldly, "I'm fine. Mom, don't worry." I wanted to believe Danielle would get over it. That time would heal the wounds, but I was wrong. The pain not only drove her away from me, but it also turned her into someone I no longer recognized. Not long after, Daniel decided to move to an apartment in a different neighborhood. "I need a fresh start, Mom," she told me in a monotonous voice, avoiding my eyes. I understood that she didn't just want to leave this house. She also wanted to escape the memories of Alex, the memories that every corner and every object brought back. I didn't blame her, but my heart broke when Lily had to go with her. The child was the only light I had left in my life, and now I could only see her on the few weekends I was allowed to keep her. The house became vast and cold. I kept Alex's photo on the wall next to a family picture from an outing when Lily was just a baby, laughing heartily on her father's shoulders. Every night I would sit in front of that photo and whisper to my son, "Alex, what should he do? I miss you so much." But only the wind whistling down the hallway would were, reminding me that all I had left was solitude. On subsequent visits, I noticed Lily was changing. Her eyes, once bright and clear, now reflected a sadness difficult to name. She spoke less, smiled less, and whenever I tried to ask her anything, she would lower her head and hug Barnaby tighter as if he were her only shield. "I'm fine, Grandma," she would always tell me. But her look told a different story. I asked Danielle, but she only gave me evasive replies. "Don't worry, Mom, I take good care of Lily." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was doing everything she could to be a good mother, but an ever-growing unease consumed me. I had no choice but to swallow my tears and watch helplessly as my granddaughter slowly drifted away. And it was then that this veil of secrecy was torn away by a terrifying whisper from my little Lily Smith. I tried to calm Lily after her confession, gently stroking her messy hair, whispering, "It's okay, my love. Grandma will take care of everything." But Lily just shook her head, her eyes tightly shut as if she wanted to hide from the world. She pressed Barnaby, the worn teddy bear who had become her only friend in those lonely days, against her chest. I wanted to ask her more, to pull out more details, but seeing her tiny shoulders shaking, I didn't have the courage to insist. "Come on, sweetheart, rest for a little while," I said, my voice as sweet as I could make it. Even though a hurricane was raging inside me with fury, that afternoon I decided to take Lily to school. The child needed the familiar atmosphere of the classrooms and her. Friends momentarily forget the fear that was consuming her. I took her hand as we walked along the familiar gravel path, but every step weighed heavily on me. Lily remained silent the whole way. She only looked up occasionally, as if she wanted to say something, but didn't dare. I smiled, trying to hide the anguish gnawing at me. "What are you going to learn today at school?" I asked, but Lily just shook her head without answering. I knew she was carrying a weight too great for her age. When we arrived at the school, I decided to stay a moment to speak with Miss Jenkins, Lily's teacher. Miss Jenkins was a middle-aged woman with kind but sharp eyes, always attentive to her students. I found her in the teacher's lounge where the smell of chalk and paper still lingered. "Miss Jenkins, can I speak with you for a moment?" I said quietly, as if afraid someone might overhear. Miss Jenkins looked at me with a slight frown of concern. "Of course, Mrs. Granderson. Has something happened with Lily?" I sat down on a wooden chair in the room and told her what Lily had told me that morning. My voice trembled as I mentioned the girl locked in the basement. Miss Jenkins listened attentively, her brow furrowed and hands tightly clasped. When I finished, she hesitated for a few seconds, as if kissing every word. "Mrs. Granderson, I've also noticed that Lily has changed recently. She gets startled easily. Sometimes she spaces out in class and can't focus." She paused, looking at me with unease. "In art class, she's been drawing very strange pictures. It's almost always a solitary child in a dark room. Behind her are messy black lines like bars." My heart shrank as if someone were squeezing it. Those black lines like bars? Miss Jenkins' words were a direct hit, confirming my fears. "Do y'all think that's something out of the ordinary?" I asked, almost whispering. Miss Jenkins shook her head, her gaze troubled. "I can't say for sure, ma'am, but I am worried about her emotional state. She might be going through something very difficult." I nodded, feeling the floor crumble beneath my feet. "Thank you, Miss Jenkins," I said, getting up, although my legs were trembling as if they couldn't support me. Walking back home, I felt like a ghost. The images of Lily's drawings, the girl in the dark room, and the black lines like bars wouldn't let me go. I wondered what Lily had seen. Was there truly a child locked up? Or was it just the imagination of a deeply wounded little girl? But her frightened eyes, her trembling voice wouldn't let me dismiss the story. I needed more clues, more proof to understand what was happening. In the afternoon, I sat on my perch, watching the red crepe myrtles bloom in the yard. The wind blew strongly, and I shuddered as if it carried a warning. Suddenly, I saw Mr. Sterling, the elderly, kind neighbor. Walking by, Mr. Sterling was well-liked throughout the neighborhood, a widower with a sharp gaze. As if nothing on that street could escape him. Seeing my distressed appearance, he stopped, resting his wooden cane on the step. "Mrs. Granderson, are you all right?" he asked. "You look like you've seen the devil himself." I smiled weakly, trying to hide my concern. "I'm just a little tired, Mr. Sterling. How are you?" But he wasn't fooled. He sat on a wooden bench next to me and said in a grave voice, "Mrs. Granderson, I know you aren't one to worry over nothing. Is something going on with Lily?" I hesitated, unsure whether I should share it, but remembering Lily's scared look, I decided to tell him only a part, just enough to probe. Lily told me something strange about a little girl at Danielle's house. I don't know what to think anymore, Mr. Sterling frowned. His eyes narrowed. After a moment of silence, he lowered his voice as if afraid someone might hear. Mrs. Granderson. There's something I haven't told anyone. One night last week, I couldn't sleep, so I went out to the yard. I saw Danielle rushing into the house, holding hands with a little girl. It certainly wasn't Lily. It was really past midnight. He stopped, looking at me as if unsure if he should continue. I also heard a muffled cry. At the time, I thought it might be sick Lily crying, but now that I hear your story, it seems strange. Mr. Sterling's words struck me like lightning. My heart pounded fiercely. My hands gripped the edge of my coat. Are you sure, Mr. Sterling? Did you get a good look? I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. I couldn't make out their face, but it wasn't Lily. She was smaller with shorter hair. I didn't want to say anything for fear of misjudging Danielle, but please be careful. I nodded, feeling loose pieces start to fit into a terrifying puzzle in my mind. That night, Danielle came to pick up Lily. I stood in the doorway, watching her enter. My heart heavy. Her gaze, sharp as a knife, scanned my body up and down as if assessing how much I knew. Thanks for watching, Lily, she said coldly without a hint of her former warmth. Lily hid behind her mother, hugging Barnaby tightly, looking at me with anxious eyes. I wanted to hold her back to ask more questions, but Danielle's glare stopped me. She took Lily's hand and quickly pulled her away without another word. I remained on the threshold, watching their silhouettes disappear down the alley, my heart oppressed. At dawn, I woke up with an unbearable weight in my chest, as if the whole world was against me. I had decided to step out of my comfort zone and face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I took the first bus toward the downtown precinct, sitting silently in the back, looking through the foggy window. The familiar streets passed by, but that day they felt distant, cold. The police precinct building appeared my eyes, an old building with stained walls. I went inside, and there, heavy with the smell of damp paper and burned coffee, intensified my anxiety. I stood in front of the front desk, my hands trembling as I clutched my coat, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to speak with the officer in charge. I told the young patrolman, who was glancing through some records. He looked at me with a spark of curiosity, and then led me to a small room where Commander Davis was sitting behind a scratched wooden desk. Commander Davis was a middle-aged man with a hardened face and tired eyes, as if he had witnessed too many painful stories. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began to tell him everything. I spoke of Lily's whisper, the girl locked in the basement, the strange drawings Miss Jenkins described, and Mr. Sterling's account of the unknown child Wilbeard late at night. My voice shook, but I tried to speak clearly, as if every word was a brick to build a wall of truth. Sir, I know this sounds crazy, but Lily isn't lying. My granddaughter is scared, and I believe something very bad is happening. I finished, looking intently into Commander Davis's eyes, hoping he could see the urgency in mine. Commander Davis listened, his hand tapping a steady rhythm on the desk. But when I finished, he slowly shook his head. Mrs. Granderson, I understand your concern, he said in a flat, emotionless voice. But all we have are the words of a child, a few drawings, and a neighbor's testimony. That's not enough probable cause to request a search warrant for your daughter-in-law's home. His words were like a bucket of cold water in my face. I felt the blood stop running in my veins. I clenched my hands tight to contain the trembling. But what if there really is a child in danger, sir? I pleaded, my voice breaking. If Lily is telling the truth and we do nothing, what will happen to that girl? Commander Davis sighed, and a faint flicker of compassion appeared in his eyes. "We will file your report," he replied with the same coldness. "But for now, you have to wait. We need more concrete evidence." I wanted to scream, to say that time waits for no one, that every minute could be a minute of danger for the child Lily spoke of, but I just nodded. I stood up, feeling like my legs could barely hold me. "Thank you, sir," I muttered, although inside I only wanted to scream with powerlessness. As I left the precinct, I felt like the whole world was turning its back on me. The midday sun beat down, but I only felt cold. I walked to the bus stop, my mind blank, repeating over and over, what do I do now? I had hoped the police would act immediately, that they would believe Lily's words. But now all I had left was solitude and the fear of not being able to protect either my granddaughter or that nameless child. That afternoon I went to the market to buy some food, trying to occupy myself with the mundane to stay calm. But as I walked between the familiar stalls, I heard the whispers. "Poor old Mrs. Granderson, she's losing her mind. She must have had troubles." A fish vendor murmured to her colleague loud enough for me to hear, "Who accuses their own daughter-in-law of kidnapping children?" I stopped, feeling a dagger in my heart. I turned toward her, but she immediately lowered her head, pretending to busy herself with the fish on her table. I knew it instantly. Danielle had acted faster than I thought. She had already spread the word throughout the neighborhood, saying I was delusional for missing Lily, so much that I had invented a story to get my granddaughter back. I returned home with a heart as heavy as a stone. I sat on the porch watching the crepe myrtle blossoms fall, trying to find some calm. But the tragedy reached its peak that very night. When the sun set, I heard a car stop in front of the gate. Danielle Comito fetched Lily, but this time she didn't come into the house as usual. She stood in the yard hugging Lily tightly, crying hysterically in front of her brother. "Ethan, she's slandering me, Ethan," Danielle shouted, her voice broken. "She says I kidnap children, that I want to ruin my life. I only want to take care of Lily, and she does this to me." Ethan, a tall, rough man, stepped toward me, pointing his finger and growling. "Ma'am, please leave my family alone. Who do you think you are to dare defame me, sister, like this?" I stood motionless, my heart gripped as if being strangled. The neighbors began to gather in the street, and all those looks of curiosity, pity, and distrust were fixed on me. Poor Mrs. Granderson must miss her granddaughter too much. "That's why she immense things," someone murmured. "Poor thing. She's getting old," another agreed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say I wasn't crazy, that Lily had seen something awful, but the words were stuck in my throat. I just stood there motionless, feeling the whole world turning against me. From the car, Lily turned to look at me through the window. Her eyes were filled with sadness and despair, as if saying, "Grandma, save me." I wanted to run to her, hug her, not let her go, but my legs were nailed to the ground. Daniel started the engine, and the car drove away, leaving my granddaughter behind and me alone, exposed under the neighborhood's gaze. I heard the murmurs as behind my back from people who were once close neighbors and now looked at me like a deranged old woman. I might be alone, but deep down I knew I couldn't give up. Stumbling, I entered the house after that bitter confrontation in front of the neighbors stopped. My steps were heavy, chained by the looks of suspicion and the whispering. I thought I had grown used to the pain of loss, but now I felt like a dry leaf swept away by the wind without the strength to resist the storm. I collapsed onto the old armchair in the living room, my gaze fixed on Alex's portrait on the wall. My son's smile was still as warm as ever, but it only tore me up more inside. "Alex, what should I do?" I whispered, my voice broken in the stillness of the room. No one answered. Only the whistling wind on the porch and the news in the television that I couldn't hear. The only thing I heard was my heart screaming in silence. I stayed there with my hands covering my face, feeling that the entire world had turned its back on me. The image of Lily looking out at me through the car window with that infinite sadness was like a knife piercing my soul. Danielle had successfully made me the neighborhood lunatic. Her rumors that I was hallucinating from missing my granddaughter too much were like needles digging into my pride. I had pinned all my hopes on the visit to the precinct, but I only received Commander Davis's cold refusal. Not sufficient evidence, he told me. How could I wait when Lily was terrified when perhaps another unknown girl was in danger? I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock ticking away every second of my helplessness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's look or heard her dreadful whisper again. There's a little girl locked in the basement. I turned, hugging the pillow where Lily had slept the night before, as if it still held her scent, as if it could give me strength to continue. But all I felt was a cold emptiness in my chest. I asked myself, Clara, are you doing the right thing? Or are you truly just a delusional old woman, as they say? The next morning, I still tried to go to the market as usual, hoping the bustle would help distract me. But upon entering, I felt an obvious change. The regular vendors, the ones who used to greet me with a kind smile, suddenly fell silent when they saw me from a distance. They leaned toward each other, murmuring, and their looks were a blend of pity and distance. Poor Mrs. Granderson. She misses her granddaughter so much, she's lost Hermond. I heard a vegetable seller whisper to the woman next to her. I lowered my head, hurried my pace, and pretended not to have heard, but every word struck me like a hammer blow to the chest. I wanted to scream, to tell them I wasn't crazy, that Lily had seen something terrible. But I knew doing so would only make everyone believe Danielle's story even more. On my way back home, I ran into Brenda, my closest friend in the neighborhood. She stood at the gate with a wicker basket in her hands, and her face filled with worry when she saw me. Unlike the others, Brenda didn't avoid me. She came closer, led me to a corner by the fence, and squeezed my hands tightly. Clara, I know you, she said in a low but firm voice. I don't believe you would invent this. I saw Lily's eyes last night when Danielle took her away. The child was scared. Clara, if you give up now, that regret will stay with you for the rest of your life. Her words ran down my spine like lightning. They didn't dispel my despair, but they ignited a tiny spark of hope. I took her hand, tears close to falling. Brenda, thank you, I whispered. But I don't know what to do anymore. No one believes me. Brenda squeezed harder with a determination in her eyes that I hadn't seen in myself for a long time. You have to keep going, Clara, for Lily and for yourself. Don't let the gossip make you retreat. I nodded, though my heart was still heavy. Brenda was right. I couldn't give up. But what could I do when I felt like the whole world was against me? That afternoon, I started trimming the crepe myrtles in the yard, seeking a little calm in the routine. The red petals fell to the ground like small drops of blood, increasing my unease. Suddenly, I heard hurried footsteps. Mr. Sterling, the elderly neighbor, appeared at the fence with a package of coffee in his hand and a mysterious look on his face. Mrs. Granderson, you have to see this, he said, lowering his voice as if afraid me might hear him. I stopped what I was doing, my heart sinking. What's wrong, Mr. Sterling? I asked, approaching him. He led me inside, firmly closed the door, and took an old cell phone out of his pocket. I asked my nephew at the corner store to check the security cameras from last week. He explained, his voice trembling with emotion. Look, Clara, I think you need to see this. The screen lit up, showing blurry, grainy images. I held my breath and watched the video. It was Danielle, my daughter-in-law, the woman who was once part of my family, leading an unknown little girl by the hand, rushing her into her house late at midnight. The little girl was wearing worn pajamas with tangled hair and a figure, smaller than Lily's, walking awkwardly as if she was afraid. I, Clara, a woman of 65 years, felt the floor open up beneath me. Lily's murmur about a girl locked in the basement was no longer the confused story of a child. It was the truth. And this video was the evidence I'd prayed for. I looked at Mr. Sterling, my voice catching in my throat. "Mr. Sterling, are you sure there isn't some mistake?" I asked, although deep down I already knew the answer. He nodded firmly, his gaze more serious than ever. "There can be no mistake, Mrs. Granderson. I saw Fatchine with my own eyes. I just didn't imagine the camera recorded it too. I was in the yard that night, and I know it wasn't Lily." His words were like a stab, painful, but they also gave me strength. I clutched the phone tightly as if it were the only life preserver in the storm that was sinking me. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I whispered close to tears. "You don't know how important this is to me." Without a second thought, I decided I had to take that video to the precinct immediately. I couldn't wait any longer. Every minute that passed was a minute in which the girl in the video, and perhaps Lily too, remained in danger. I quickly put in an old coat, covered my head with a scarf, and left Mr. Sterling's house with my heart burning. The gravel path leading to the precinct seemed longer today, every step heavy but filled with determination. I thought of Lily, her frightened eyes, and Alex, my son, who would surely want me to protect his daughter at all costs. Upon entering the precinct, the air smelled the same: old paper and burned coffee. But this time, I didn't feel afraid. I had proof, and I wouldn't leave until they acted. Immediately asked to speak with Commander Davis, the young patrolman at reception looked at me, perhaps noticed the urgency in my eyes, and quickly led me to the familiar room. Commander Davis was sitting behind the desk, his face stern and his eyes tired. "Mrs. Granderson." "Back again," he said with a hint of surprise. "Is there anything new?" I took a deep breath, placed Mr. Sterling's cell phone on the desk, and said, "Sir, I have evidence. Please look at this video." I played the clip, and the image of Danielle and the unknown girl appeared on the screen. I recounted what Mr. Sterling had seen, what Lily had told me, and also the strange drawing she had made at school. My voice trembled, but I tried to sound clear and firm. "That's not Lily, and I didn't know who this girl is, but I believe she's in danger." Commander Davis watched the video, barely frowning, but his gaze was still full of doubt. "It could be that she was just watching a friend's daughter," he said in a monotonous tone. His words were another dagger that made my heart sink. I couldn't let him dismiss this evidence. I leaned forward, almost begging. "I implore you, investigate further. That girl isn't from our neighborhood. I've lived there for so many years. I know. And Lily, my granddaughter, is scared. She talks about a girl locked in a basement crying, saying her hand hurts. I beg you, believe me." Perhaps the urgency in my voice or the despair in my eyes made Commander Davis hesitate. He signaled to a nearby young officer, "Check if there is any missing person report that matches this girl's characteristics," he ordered seriously. The officer nodded, checked the files, and began typing quickly on the computer. I remained seated, my heart pounding hard, my hands gripping the edge of my coat as if holding on to my last hope. A few minutes later, the young officer suddenly shouted, "Commander, look at this." The girl in the video has characteristics that match Chloe Vance. Age 5, reported missing 2 weeks ago in the neighboring county. He showed the computer screen to Commander Davis, and I watched his face change instantly. His tired eyes now shone with a seriousness I had never seen before. He stood up abruptly and said firmly, "Verify the information immediately. Contact the neighboring precinct. Request the complete disappearance file." My heart hammered hard within my chest as if it were about to burst. This was it. This was the proof I needed. The name of the girl, Chloe, was like a lightning bolt that pierced the darkness of my soul. I looked at Commander Davis, tears about to spill, but I contained them. "Thank you, sir," I whispered, my voice choked. "Thank you for listening." Commander Davis didn't respond, only nodded. But in his eyes, I saw a shift. There were no longer doubts, only cold determination. At that moment, the precinct door burst open and some worried neighbors entered. I recognized them, Mrs. Hayes, who sells pies on the corner, and Mr. O'Donnell, who often plays chess with Mr. Sterling. Mrs. Hayes spoke first, her voice trembling. "Commander, we heard Mrs. Granderson came in about Danielle Dot. We also have something to say." She hesitated an instant and looked at me as if asking permission. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "We've heard crying. Strange noises at Danielle's house, even on nights when Lily was staying with Mrs. Grand's. At first, we thought it was just kids having tantrums, but now we're not so sure." Mr. O'Donnell nodded and added, "I saw a light flickering in her basement right before dawn." I didn't think much of it, but now that I think about it, it seems strange. Their words were like the final pieces of a puzzle, completing the terrifying image already forming in my mind. I looked at Commander Davis, hoping he saw the gravity of the situation. He nodded, and not a trace of doubt remained in his eyes. "There is sufficient evidence, ma'am," he said firmly. "We will request a search warrant immediately." I nodded as tears finally streamed down my face. For the first time, after so many dark days, I saw a ray of hope. I returned home after leaving the precinct, my mind in a knot, happy that they had finally decided to act, but also fearful of what was to come. I thought I was already used to life's storms, but now I was facing a hurricane I didn't know if I could withstand. Mr. Sterling's video, the confirmation about Chloe and the neighbors' accounts had ignited a spark of hope. But they also made me shudder at the thought of what I was about to face. Danielle, my daughter-in-law, who was once part of my family, was now on the other side of the truth, and I didn't know what awaited me when the veil of secrecy was lifted. I couldn't sleep that night. The drumming off the rain on the sheet metal roof sounded like a war drum resounding in the small house. I sat in the living room under the yellow light that cast shadows on Alex's photo on the wall. My son's smile was still gentle, but his eyes seemed to look at me as if saying, "Mom, you have to be strong." I clasped my hands and murmured a prayer, asking Alex's spirit to protect Lily, my granddaughter, and little Chloe, that innocent girl I had never met, but who was now the reason I had to keep fighting. "Alex, help me," I said, my voice broken. "Help me protect them." I thought of Lily, my granddaughter's frightened look, and the terrifying whisper in the kitchen that morning. I thought of Chloe, the girl in the video, with her ragged pajamas and stumbling walk. Every image was like a stab at my heart, but also gave me more determination. I couldn't allow those children to keep suffering for a single minute more. But I was also afraid that when the truth came to light, it would shatter the little faith remained of my family. Danielle, though changed, was still Lily's mother, the one who once called me Mom. How could I face her? How could I bear the truth that she might be involved in something so horrible? The next morning, I went to market as usual, trying to cling to my routines so I wouldn't sink into anguish. But the atmosphere at the market was different. Curious stares and murmurs followed me like a shadow. There goes Mrs. Granderson again, accusing her daughter-in-law. A fruit vendor murmured to the woman next to her, believing I didn't hear. She must miss her granddaughter so much she's gone crazy. I lowered my head and hurried my pace, not wanting to facet those looks of pity or suspicion. I bought a few necessities, some vegetables, some bread, and quickly returned home with a heavy heart. I no longer cared about the gossip. I only wanted to focus on Lily, on Chloe, on what was to come. Around noon, Brenda, my lifelong friend, arrived with a hot casserole. She entered the house, placed the dish on the table, and sat beside me, squeezing my hand tightly. "Clara, be brave," she said, her voice warm but firm. "I know how much you're suffering, but the truth will come out. Don't let chatter make you back down." I looked into her eyes and found deep empathy there. She was one of the few people who hadn't turned her back on me, who didn't see me as a delusional old woman. "Brenda, I'm scared," I confessed, my voice trembling. "If the truth is tutorable, I don't know how I'll face it. Lily, my granddaughter, what will become of her and her mother?" Brenda squeezed my hand tighter, interrupting me. "Clara, you are the strongest woman I know. You lost Alex and still stood tall for Lily. Don't doubt yourself. You are doing the right thing." Her words were like a small flame that warmed my cold heart. I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Thank you, Brenda," I whispered. "I'll do my best." She smiled, patted my shoulder, and got up to leave, leaving with a delicious smelling casserole that I didn't have the appetite to try. Later that afternoon, Mr. Sterling approached, his face full of concern. He sat on the bench by the entrance, leaning on his cane, and spoke in a low voice as if afraid someone might hear him. "Mrs. Granderson, I heard strange noises at Danielle's house again last night," he said, his gaze serious. "It sounded like someone knocking on a door and then muffled sobs. I didn't dare get close, but I'm sure something is wrong." His words tied a knot in my chest. I thought of Chloe, of what Lily had said, and I felt as if an invisible hand was strangling me. "Mr. Sterling, do you think that girl is still there?" I asked, my voice cracking. He nodded, his look full of unease. "I don't know, Clara, but I hope the police sort everything out soon." I took his hand, thanking him once more for not turning. Gee, his back on me. Mr. Sterling's news left me even more uneasy, but it also reinforced my conviction that what Lily was saying was true. I couldn't allow that child, Chloe, to continue suffering. I had to act, even if only a tiny spark of hope remained. That night, I called Miss Jenkins, Lily's teacher. I told her what was happening, my voice trembling. "Miss Jenkins, if anything happens to Lily, please watch over her for me. I don't know what tomorrow might bring, but I need to know she'd be safe." Miss Jenkins immediately agreed without hesitation. "Mrs. Granderson, don't worry. I'll keep an eye on Lily. You do what you have to do." Her words relieved me a little, although the anguish still weighed heavily on my chest. Before going to sleep, I carefully put away my documents, the family album, and also Lily's strange drawings in a small bag. I didn't know what the next day would bring, but I wanted to be ready for anything. I sat in front of Alex's photo, whispering, "Son, I'm doing what I can. I won't let Lily suffer anymore." I closed my eyes, seeking a bit of peace, but my heart remained unsettled. Suddenly, in the dead of night, the phone rang sharply, breaking the silence of the house. I started and answered immediately, my heart pounding. It was Commander Davies' voice, brief but firm. "Mrs. Granderson, we are executing the search warrant at Daniel Granderson's house at dawn tomorrow. Be ready." I slumped into the air, the receiver trembling in my hands. "Thank you, sir," I muttered, my voice broken. "I'll be ready." I hung up and looked out the window where the rain was beating relentlessly. Its sound was a reminder that the true storm was about to arrive. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The faint light barely filtered through the window blinds. I felt my chest burn as if the whole world were pressing down on me. Today was the decisive day, the day when the truth, painful or terrifying, would come to light. I put on a thick coat, wrapped myself in a scarf, and with trembling hands tied my shoes. I looked at Alex's photo on the wall and whispered, "Son, give me strength." The image of Lily with her frightened eyes and Chloe and Nestor. Sterling's video kept circling in my head, pushing me to move forward, Even though fear paralyzed me. The sharp sound of patrol cars stopping in front of my house snapped me out of my thoughts. Commander Davis got out of the car, his stern face showing no emotion. "Let's go, Mrs. Granderson," he said firmly. I nodded, clutching the bag with the papers and Lily's drawings tightly as if they were an amulet. I got into the car, remaining silent in the back seat, looking through the foggy window. The drive to Danielle's house seemed shorter than ever, but every second weighed like a century. I thought of Lily, of Chloe, and I wondered, will I have the strength to face the truth? We arrived at Danielle's house when the sky was still gray with dark clouds floating above, announcing a storm. The cold wind blew in gusts, making the red crepe myrtle petals fall onto the yard like drops of blood. I stood in front of the gate, my heart beating rapidly, feeling my entire body shake. Commander Davis knocked on the door. The sharp knocks echoed in the silence. The door burst open and Danielle appeared. Her face was pale with surprise, mutely for an instant because immediately her gaze turned to fury. "What are you doing here?" She shouted, her voice icy, as if trying to hide Avery deep fear. Commander Davis coldly held up the search warrant in front of her. "We have a legal warrant. I ask you to cooperate," he said firmly, without hesitation. Danielle looked at the paper and then looked at me with eyes that seemed like knives stabbing directly into my chest. "You did this, didn't you?" She spat the words, pointing her finger at me. "Y'all want to destroy me? You want to take Lily away from me?" I remained silent, my hands clutching the edge of my coat, not responding. I wanted to tell her that all I wanted was to protect Lily, to save little Chloe, but the words were stuck in my throat. I could only look at her, the woman who was once my daughter-in-law, and who now seemed like a stranger. Suddenly, Ethan, Daniel's brother, rushed out of the house, his neck tense, shouting, "This is a private home. You have no right. You're slandering and humiliating my family." He was a heavy-set man. His voice roared like a cornered animal. Commander Davis didn't bother to answer. He just signaled for his team of officers to enter. I stood motionless in the yard, and through the crack in the door, I caught sight of Lily huddled in a corner off the living room, tightly hugging Barnaby. Her little eyes were red and swollen as if she had cried a lot. I wanted to run to her to tell her grandma was here, that everything would be all right. But Danielle's cold stare stopped me. The police began to search every room. The sound of their boots hitting the tile floor mingled with the noise of papers being shuffled. The atmosphere was so tense that it seemed like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible. Danielle followed them, crying and screaming. "It's all my mother-in-law's fault. She wants to destroy my life. How can you believe a crazy old woman?" Her words were like knives that pierced my heart. I wanted to shout that I wasn't crazy, that I only wanted to protect Lily, but I stayed there in silence with the sensation that the whole world was against me. Commander Davis did not respond to her. He led his team direct to the end of the hallway where there was a small old iron door leading to the basement. I immediately felt the air change. Danielle's face transformed into an expression of sheer panic. She ran, spreading her arms to block the entrance, her voice broken. "There's nothing in there. It's just an old storage room. No one can go in." The desperation in her tone tied a knot in my chest. I knew Lily had told the truth. Something horrible was hidden behind that door. One of the officers stepped forward, calmly, putting the master key into the rusty lock. Ethan roared, trying to lunge to stop him, but both officers immediately restrained him. "You can't open it," he yelled, struggling, but his strength wasn't enough to break free from the burly men. I practically stopped breathing, my hands clenched until they hurt. The neighbors were now gathering in the street, murmuring and staring intently at the house. I heard someone say, "My God, could what Mrs. Granderson said be true?" but I no longer had the presence of mind for that. All my attention was in that iron door. The lock opened with a dry click. The officer pulled the door hard, and a chilling creak resonated like the scream of a secret buried for too long. From the deep darkness inside, a weak, trembling child's cry was heard, like a contained plea for help. The basement door burst open, and a gust of damp, stale air shot out, as if the darkness itself were exhaling terrifying secrets. I was standing in Danielle's yard, feeling my heart stop. The soft sob from inside sounded weak, but clear, like a supplication from the beyond. An officer turned on his flashlight. The beam of light quickly scanned the stained walls, the destroyed cardboard boxes, and then from a shadowy corner, a small silhouette stumbled out. It was Chloe, the girl from the video, the girl Lily had spoken about with fear in her eyes. Her hair was matted, her face covered in dust, her ripped pajamas clinging to her thin body. Her left arm was wrapped precariously in a dirty rag, and her wide eyes looked in panic at the strangers around her. I was stunned. My legs gave way, and I had to grab the porch column tightly to keep from falling. The image of Chloe, so small and fragile, was like a knife wound to the heart. I thought of Lily, of what she had had to witness, and tears streamed from my eyes, rolling down my cheeks. "Chloe," I whispered, my voice breaking, as if naming her could somehow alleviate her pain. A female officer ran forward, lifting Chloe into her arms, pressing her against her chest to protect her. "Call Ames now," she shouted, her voice filled with urgency. The girl clutched an old, faded cushion, her hands trembling as if it were the only thing left of her safe world. The neighbors crowded the yard, all of them stunned. The murmurs rose like a wave. "My God, it's true. Mrs. Granderson wasteling the truth after all." A voice was heard, and I perceived the regret in it. The same people who had turned their backs on me, who had called me a crazy old woman, were now standing there, heads bowed, unable to look me in the eye. But I felt no triumph, only pain. Pain for Chloe, pain for Lily, and pain for myself, seeing my family broken once more. Danielle screamed maniacally, lunging toward the officer carrying Chloe. "No, I didn't lock her up. I just wanted to protect her," she shrieked, tears streaming down her pale face. The other voice no longer held any conviction. It was nothing more than the desperate wail of someone who knew her secret had been discovered. Ethan, Danielle's brother, continued struggling, trying to defend her, while officers firmly held him. "This is a setup. They're ambushing my sister. It's all that old woman's plan," he shouted, his eyes blazing. I remained motionless, not answering, only looking at him and then at Danielle, my soul torn apart. I once considered them family, but now they were like strangers standing on the other side of the truth. Commander Davis interrupted, his voice icy, quiet. "The crime is in plain sight." He signaled for his team to continue searching the basement. They rummaged through old boxes and checked every corner. And then an officer lifted a bundle of documents, his voice trembling. "Commander, you had better see this." I held my breath as I watched Commander Davis open the package. They were notebooks filled with strange symbols and scattered phrases about a dark cult. In one of them, I saw the name Elias Thorne scrolled next to a signature. Commander Davis frowned. "Andy." His voice turned grave. "Elias Thorne. That name rings a bell. He was the leader of an extremist group that the press exposed last year." Commander Davis's words were like a lightning bolt, stunning both me and the crowd around us. I thought of Danielle, of the changes in her after Alex's death, her strange look, the terrifying silence she maintained every time I asked her about Lily. How could she have gotten involved with someone like Elias Thorne? How could someone who was once my sweet daughter-in-law fall down such a dark path? I wanted to run to her, ask her, understand why, but my legs were nailed to the floor. Chloe was taken to the ambulance. The little girl was weak, her eyes still full of panic, but her voice rose in a plea. "Mommy, I want to go back to Mommy." Those words broke my heart. I thought of Chloe's mother, who was surely suffering somewhere, waiting for her daughter, and I prayed that they would soon be reunited. I looked over at Lily. I saw her huddled in a corner, her eyes red, watching the ambulance drive away. I wanted to run and hug her, but Commander Davis signaled for me to stay put, as if he knew this moment wasn't over yet. Danielle was handcuffed. Two officers led her out of the house. As she passed me, she stopped, her eyes home with hatred. "You destroyed everything?" She hissed through gritted teeth, her voice trembling with rage and pain. I looked her in the eyes, trying to find any trace of the daughter-in-law once loved, but I only found an unknown coldness. I returned home after a long day at the precinct, my body exhausted, but my heart still shocked. I had crossed the darkest days of my life, but now, with the truth exposed, I felt a ray of hope filtering into my heart. News of the case spread like a hurricane. Our small town suddenly became the center of attention. The press and television arrived. Satellite trucks filled the street, and reporters with cameras and microphones constantly asked about the story of Chloe, Lily, and me, but I didn't want to talk much. I only wanted to be by Lily's side, hug her tightly, and know that she was safe. I went to the hospital that afternoon where Chloe was being cared for. Her parents, the Vance family, had arrived immediately after receiving the police call. I stood in the hallway, looking through the glass, watching them desperately hug the daughter they thought was lost forever, crying with muffled sobs. Mrs. Vance, a thin woman with red eyes, held Chloe, whispering words of love, while Mr. Vance, visitor her, wiped his tears, struggling to keep his voice steady as he thanked the doctors. That instant broke my heart, but it also filled me with a strange warmth. I thought of Lily, of the fear she had endured, and I knew all my efforts had not been in vain. The Vances approached me when I stood silently in the hallway. Mrs. Vance squeezed my hand tightly, her voice choked. "Mrs. Granderson, we don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for you and Lily, we might have lost our daughter forever." Mr. Vance nodded, his eyes moist. "You brought the light back into our lives. Chloe is everything to us." I smiled as tears rolled down my cheeks. "I only did what anyone would do," I said, my voice trembling. "The real hero is Lily. My granddaughter had the courage to tell the truth, even though she was very scared." They nodded, squeezing my hand harder, and I felt a deep gratitude in that gesture, like a fire warming my cold heart. Outside the hospital entrance, I saw a group of neighbors waiting. The ones who had previously limmered behind my back, who had called me a crazy old woman, now looked at me with different eyes. Mrs. Hayes, the pie vendor, approached, bowed her head, and said in a trembling voice, "Mrs. Granderson, we were wrong to doubt you. Please forgive us." Mr. O'Donnell, who then played chess with Mr. Sterling, also came closer, his face full of guilt. "You did what none of us dared to do. You truly are a hero." I shook my head and smiled slightly. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a grandmother who wants to protect her granddaughter." But inside I felt a small relief. The looks of distrust had disappeared, replaced by respect, and I knew that, however, the truth had triumphed. The entire community began to praise Lily as Asmo hero. They spoke of her bravery, of how an 8-year-old dared to tell the truth, even though she had to face fear and the doubts of the whole world. I listened to those words, and my heart filled with pride and pain. Lily didn't deserve to go through this. She should have had a carefree childhood full of laughter and worry-free days. But I knew my Lily was stronger than I imagined, and I would do everything I could to help her overcome these wounds. The police announced the preliminary results of the investigation the next day. Danielle was charged with kidnapping, unlawful detention, and ties to a dangerous cult. The notebooks found in the basement with Elias Thorne's signature opened up a broader investigation into a criminal network that the police had been tracking for some time. Ethan, Danielle's brother, was also investigated for accessory after the fact, although he denied everything. I heard those reports on the evening news, sitting in the living room, hugging the pillow where Lily used to sleep tightly. I thought of Danielle, the young woman who was once my daughter-in-law, who smiled radiantly at family dinners. What had changed her? What led her down this dark path? I had no answers, but I knew the truth, however painful, had come to light. A few days later, my house was filled with laughter again. For the first time after so many gray months, Lily and Chloe were playing together on the porch beneath the crepe myrtles. Chloe was much better. Her smile had returned, though her eyes still held a faint trace of fear. Lily, with Barnaby in her hand, ran around laughing while Chloe tried to catch her. I watched them from the doorway, my heart warm but also heavy. I knew the path to healing for both of them would be long. But that moment, with their laughter resonating, was a new beginning. The Vance family came to visit that afternoon. Bringing a bouquet of fresh flowers and a homemade dessert, Mrs. Vance took my hand. Her voice emotional. "Mrs. Granderson, we want you to be Chloe's adopted grandma. You saved her life, and we want her to have another family, a grandma like you." I was stunned. Tears welled up again. I don't know what to say," I whispered, embracing Lily and Chloe. "You are the light, the hope for all of us." That Chloe looked at me with a timid smile, and in her eyes I saw a trust I had never seen before. That night, when Lily snuggled beside me in bed, she asked in a small voice, "Grandma, am I really a hero?" I smiled and kissed her son chair. "Yes, my love. You are your grandma's bravest hero because you dared to believe the truth and say it out loud." Lily smiled for the first time after so many days, and I saw the light return to her eyes. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I love you, Grandma." I held her close, silent tears falling. "I love you too, Lily." Outside, the night breeze gently moved the crepe myrtle, letting petals fall beneath the bright moon. I closed my eyes, feeling a strange peace. I thought of Alex, his smile, and I knew that from heaven my son was smiling too. He must have been proud because his daughter had saved a life and because the truth had finally conquered the darkness. I hugged Lily tighter and silently whispered in my heart, "Alex, I did it. I kept my promise to you." And in that instant, I knew that even though there were still challenges ahead, the light had returned to our small family. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identities of people involved. We do not tell this to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I'm convinced that courage leads us to better days. Thank you.